Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job.
Welcome back, friends. Thank you for joining us. If you have a chance, head down into the show notes. We're going to have a few things listed there, as well as links to our Gumroad store and ways to leave us a review on the podcast that we always love seeing that. And head over to YouTube if you can and hit subscribe. We got some fun things coming out, and you can follow along with our ancient civilizations journey that we're doing right now. We're, I think, through Egypt by the time this has come out, and we're on to new and more ancient civilizations, and you can follow along with our journey there. Today, we are talking about doubt. As we're kind of doing like a little series here of podcasts focusing on a lot of the issues that, at this time of the year, a lot of new homeschoolers are kind of starting their first steps into the homeschooling world. And we've had a few podcasts here that are centering on, supporting those families and whatnot. And it's always good to, even if we're a seasoned homeschooler, to listen to, ideas on ways to kind of purge the doubt and, the imposter syndrome that comes in. And I'll put a link to that great podcast that we did a long time ago. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of questions that people have and a lot of fears and anxieties because we're holding our children's education in our hands, and it's kind of a scary thing. And you can create a lot of anxiety and doubt.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So we had an imposter syndrome episode that was very, very early on. It's like episode 7 or something. It's very, very early. So that one
you can listen to us. It's really green podcasters.
Yeah, but that one's the real just empowerment and encouragement episode. Yeah. So if you're really looking for, you want to hear all of that, just kind of nice positive energy, that's what that episode's about. This one, we really wanted to look at what causes, kind of really break it down and analyze what causes doubt. What are the impacts of having that? How can we find some solutions, some coping strategies with that, because we all do feel doubt, even though we're a few years in, we still doubt ourselves from time to time, and especially when we hit some stumbling blocks with our kids, we doubt, like, am I doing things right? Is this the right thing to do? So,
or maybe you're a little overwhelmed and it's been really difficult semester for you, and
absolutely,
you're wondering if you want to continue doing this, and all those fears come in. And trust me, we all have it. All the homeschoolers have it, and it's a common experience, especially if something, that is as grand as this, as big as educating children. And, some of us are committing to do this for the long haul. And that's such a daunting experience. Yeah. We were talking about it today when we were coming on the walk that our oldest is 8. And we're like, oh my God, she's 8, and it's both, wow, it's been a long, long journey already, but also we have a long ways to go from here. But it can be just a daunting experience that you're, looking forward into time, and it's such a long time. But, like anything, it's you chip away at it very slowly and whatnot. But that doubt always creeps in, that fear.
There's different seasons of homeschooling.
Oh, yeah.
You've got all the doubts and things that you have, fears that you have as a brand new homeschooler before you've started. And then once you kind of get in, you get your sea legs, then you'll hit some new problem with whether it's an issue with a student who's having trouble in a specific subject, or we're going through different changes in life and different stresses in our own home that are causing our homeschooling to be on more rocky footing, kids growing up and hormones and all kinds of things. That doubt can keep creeping back. So we thought it would be good to really break it down and kind of analyze where this comes from and what we might be able to do about it.
You said seasons of homeschooling, and I almost went into a little bit of a Rent singing there. Seasons of homeschooling. The funny here, just as an aside, I let the people know that I'm not a very musical person, but I'll never forget that we were in the movie theater together, and the that great piano riff that starts that song came on. It was a black screen, and I turned to you, and we were just dating at the time. And I go, oh my God, they're making Rent the movie. And you looked at me like I was speaking, Spanish
Yeah,
or
at
something.
that point I had not heard of
You had
Rent.
never heard of Rent.
I was very young, y'all.
And I looked at you and go, you the great thespian, that knows everything, has not heard of Rent, and me, the knucklehead football, basketball watching guy is gonna tell you about it, play. But it was funny because I had a roommate in college who was really into plays, and I drove him home once, and it's one of those things where I'm driving, and really the driver should control the music, and it should have been like a classic rock driving Bob Seger type of adventure, and he came right in and said, "Oh, hey, do you want to listen to the Rent soundtrack?" And I kind of looked at him and was like, "All right, man, whatever." And he put that on, and I had to listen to that like twice. So anyway, little side thing there. I normally am not the musical guy.
Yeah, he's so well-rounded.
I know. So let's get into it. The causes of parental doubt. There are many different things that can cause this doubt. I think the first thing that we would always experience, and I think we talked a little bit about this. We talked about it 2 weeks ago when we were talking about being a parent educator and comparing, your educational style and what from your previous education, comparing that education to what you're going to do in the home. And, first bit of doubt that we can have is comparing our homeschool to a traditional school. And it's that whole comparison, whether it's
Right.
traditional or private or a charter school. We're comparing instantly ourselves against this because by our mere choice to homeschool means that we are not doing that and we are doing this. And there's
Right.
immediately a comparison.
Right. We're comparing ourselves to teachers, right? We're not certified teachers, and now we're acting in this role. We're comparing, okay, how many hours of instruction do they do in school versus how many hours here, the subjects they cover in school versus the subjects I'm covering here.
Oh, yeah. Access to resources.
The level of the subjects, right? What are they doing? Oh, okay, well, in fourth grade in my state, they do this. And what am I doing at home? So, we're comparing all of that. And right, the access to resources, the school's got the computer lab, and our school
The
has
science
wood
lab,
wood shop, a woodworking shop,
chemistry lab and physics lab and all that
Exactly.
stuff. That may be more for high schoolers and maybe not as applicable to early learners or elementary people, but you do compare like the resources versus what they have and
right?
what you have.
Because you've made a choice. You've decided that for you and your family that your kids are gonna be home, and so there are a whole lot of things that aren't there, and you're thinking about the social opportunities here versus the ones there, and you're doing all this comparison. Underlying that is like, did I make the right decision? Am I making the right decision?
Absolutely. Next thing is, this personal expectations. You may have those for yourself or for your children. That there are these, I'm expecting them to be able to read and you do all these great things.
Well, you got to prove all those people wrong,
Exactly.
right? Maybe those people in your family or extended friend network or whatever who thought this wasn't a good idea for you to homeschool.
Yeah.
So you got to prove those people wrong that, this, obviously the proof needs to be in the pudding, right? Yeah, there's a lot of high expectations too about what your homeschool should look like. Should it look like what you see on YouTube or Pinterest,
Yep.
right? Where people have these very calm, everything is in whites and beiges, and the kids are all well behaved. And so you've got this expectation about what your homeschool
the
should
Martha
look like.
Stewart out of focus blur on everything.
I don't know, these Montessori homes that are just like immaculate, right? So you see this, and this is what it should look like, where everyone's cooperating and everyone's working together.
Ariel, you don't want a 5-gallon jug of water at a 3-year-old's height
Yeah,
where they have
that sounds
access.
like a terrible
That sounds
idea.
terrible idea.
I mean, I support all the Montessori families. I think that's great that your children can control themselves. My children could not. So,
My 4-year-old would not be able to handle it. Water within reach.
yeah, all the time.
All the time.
Right. So we have all these expectations, what it should look like from what we've seen, what we've heard from other people, what we have in our head about, hey, it's going to be great. We're not going to have these tight schedules, and we're going to be able to learn what we want to learn, and all the things that you're thinking about. And if you want a good look at that, we have an episode that we should link in the show notes about the pros and cons. Should you homeschool?
Yeah.
And that was earlier this summer. That's a great one to look at, kind of what we think things should be, and, the realities of pros and cons of what it really is. So that's a big one, is what it should look like. And then you have high expectations of, how your kids are going to perform in homeschooling. So you have high expectations for what your homeschool looks like, got expectations for yourself and how well you're going to teach. And then you have expectations for how well your kids are going to perform. Are they going to take to homeschooling? Are they going to flourish? If you've pulled them out of school, you pulled them out for a reason. So, you've got this expectation that this is going to be better, and you want to see that happen.
Or do you have unrealistic high expectations because you have family members or friends who are doubting the fact that you should even be doing this, right?
Right.
And you want
And
to prove them wrong.
That's the social pressure that you come under. You have these naysayers in your life, and we've said many times, kind of the proof is in the pudding. One of the best ways to quiet the people in your life is just to let it go until they can see it for themselves, that your kids are happy and well adjusted and that they're enjoying homeschool, and then that's fine. So we feel this pressure. And it's kind of funny whenever somebody, you find people like quiz your kids or whatever, especially when they find out you're homeschooling, and they try to do it good naturedly, but you know that they're kind of testing it. And you're like, you have this pressure and stress about how is my kid going to perform under this?
Exactly.
Right. Because you've got this social pressure to not raise, what is it? A weird, unsocialized homeschooler.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the classic stereotype
The
that we
classic
always
stereotype.
hear. Yeah. So we have these sources of doubt, whether it's comparisons, whether it's personal issues, social pressure, whatever that might be. There are impacts of the doubt now. Like they have these sources of it, like little fonts where the water's coming out. But what are the impacts of that? And the first one would be the homeschooling quality. Like, if you are doubting what you're doing, you're going to be, apprehensive about decisions you're going to make and how you are going to actually educate. And is it going to be effective? Are you going to put too much pressure because you're trying to overcome some fear? Maybe, emotional or ready to, fight your kid to move forward and to work. So there can be a lot of impacts there, especially with the quality of the education.
You might be hesitant to adapt, to make changes in the way that you're teaching because, you're doubting yourself instead of saying, hey, this curriculum's just not working for my child and me. Let's make a change. It's like, oh, is it me?
Yeah.
Am I the one doing something wrong here? So it can really affect the quality of your instruction and the harmony in your homeschool.
Yeah. And that will lead into, potentially a confidence issue with you as the educator, right? Am I being a good educator? Am I good enough? Am I doing enough? We have a great podcast on Are You Doing Enough? You start to question everything. Whenever you start doubting something, you start to question everything. Like, is that wrong? Is this wrong? Is everything wrong?
And your kids can feel that.
I
mean, they can tell when you feel uncomfortable. I mean, when something happens and one of us feels uncomfortable, our kids are like immediately clued into it. They know right away, like, oh, something's wrong.
And when you do that, you also see the fun kind of leach out, and then that leads into the engagement. The fact that it's hard to engage and be fun if you're constantly worried if you're doing something wrong.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that this causes a lot of stress and anxiety.
Absolutely.
Right. So that increases
you see it on the Facebook groups all the time, people.
All the time. And this increases anxiety, not just for parents, but for kids. They sense that mom and dad are stressed out. And then, this is the engagement, the fun, the quality, kind of these things are all wrapped together. And a lot of parents can get anxiety and think that, maybe they've made the wrong decision because their homeschool is actually a really stressful place to be.
Yeah. And even with the doubt, you may start to make decisions such as curriculum hopping or, changing up a curriculum before you actually committed to it or see it through in some respect. You're hopping around and there's a lot of inconsistency in your teaching.
Right. Yeah. Kind of the opposite. Right. So if you feel like you're doubting yourself, you may be hesitant to adapt when you need to, but you also, as you said, might be too quick to just jump around. Yeah, I'm jumping around everywhere. I'm just trying to find, the thing that'll click, when really the issue is how you're feeling about yourself and your school.
With all these doubts and the impacts of these doubts, you may see one, you may see two, you may see three of them. And a lot of times these doubts may cascade, right? Like one thing leads into another, which could potentially lead into another. And we want to kind of stymie that as soon as possible. Find where it's coming from, understand that, okay, I'm doubting myself, unnecessarily, or, I need to just trust the process, trust the curriculum, trust that my student is going to get it.
So the next thing is, when you doubt yourself too, you really lose your joy for homeschooling.
I agree.
And your drive to continue, which we really needed that drive. On those really tough days, you need to have that motivation to, when you're not feeling it or your kids aren't feeling it, to get up and give it a shot. And when you start to doubt yourself, you just lose all of that motivation. Yeah,
so we went from the causes of doubt, now we talked a little bit about the impacts of doubt. Let's get off of the downer. Let's talk about the positives. Let's talk about solutions. First one being educational empowerment.
Right. So the more you educate yourself through the reading, watching, listening to things like this podcast, the more confident you're going to feel about your abilities, the more comforted you're going to feel about, okay, the things that I'm experiencing are perfectly normal. Everybody has days where everything went wrong or where they don't feel like they're enough or, this is all really normal. So the more that you can read and listen, the more that you're going to feel comfortable in these shoes.
Yeah, I agree with you on the empowerment. Whenever you know more and you do more research and you understand more, the insecurity and the uncertainty kind of drifts away, and you become more certain about what you're doing, whether it's reading a book, about homeschooling, kind of the theory of homeschooling or something more practical, or, reading comments on a Facebook page. Sometimes that could bring you down, right? You could see the concerns of other people, but go into the comments and seeing the responses of other parents saying, I've been there and this is how I got through it. That can be a positive, uplifting thing. Just learning and understanding and becoming more aware of what you're doing. Maybe you need to be a little bit more aware of the theory behind the education so that you understand, we teach phonemes here and then we start blending words here. Right. And whatever it might be, if it's a reading curriculum or a math curriculum, just understanding it deeper can probably make you more comfortable with whatever you're doing.
Right. And maybe it's also, learning more about learning styles.
Yeah, right.
If you're really struggling with something, that here's different ways you can tackle it and approach it. And the more you know, the more prepared you'll be and the more you can feel empowered and not doubt yourself.
The more you know.
The more you know. This is a singing episode, you guys. All right, we will not do it. So the next one is really to set realistic expectations. So, no homeschool is perfect, so don't set the bar at some unattainable height because we all have days where everything goes wrong. Nothing from our plan got accomplished. And
most learning is going to be incremental. Right. There's never going to be these giant step motions.
Usually it's not a
no
eureka.
Revelation in the morning. Eureka! I know how to read. Whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are those, we talk about those aha moments, but they're small moments.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the small light bulbs. They're like, I didn't know that.
You're just chipping away.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, if you look it up, if I remember, there were the imprisoned men in the Michelangelo's on David when we went to there, and then as we walked up to David, they had these half finished statues, and the tops are very beautiful, they're perfect, and then it's just a chunk of marble, right? So I really see the education as sort of that process where you're just chipping away a little bit, and at first you don't even know what you're looking at, and then it starts to take form and it starts to look smooth. And then all of a sudden you get to the moment where you see, oh man, my learner is, this beautiful marble statue that we've slowly chiseled away. And now they've got, critical thinking. They can read and write. They have an active mind. They have a will to learn. It's just a slow process. And think of it as almost like you're building a sculpture or you're doing clay or whatnot. I really like to approach it in that incremental, small process.
Absolutely. And when you're setting your expectations, you have to realize that for both your kids and for you, that this is the process of starting to homeschool is a process of adaptation, and it takes time. We have a great series on deschooling for both parents and kids. So that applies to you. Definitely take a listen to that, because I think that's really helpful. Don't set expectations that you're just not going to meet. They have to really be real, well thought out, realistic, and something that's meaningful to you.
Yeah, and I get stuck with this too, where I feel like I'm running sometimes too fast in curriculum, and I just need to step back and slow it down. It's like, you don't need to finish an entire curriculum in 4 months. You can do 6 or 9 or 10 months, and it's okay to do that, right? Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to move too quickly, and I have to pull the reins back on myself.
Oh, we have this conversation a lot where you're like, but the kids are going to the grandparents, and then but we just didn't get through this whole week, and I got to get through this by next week. And I said, why? Yeah. And you were like, because I need to. And I said, because why? Nobody's saying you have to get through this. It's just fine. And we have to remind ourselves of that. We talked a lot in previous weeks and with deschooling and things too about setting meaningful metrics, things that isn't aligned to a state standard necessarily, but that's aligned to things that are meaningful to you, like your child wanting to pick up a book and read for pleasure, or your child getting caught up in something they were behind in, or whatever is meaningful to you. those expectations can really help keep you grounded.
And I think expectations in a homeschool, I think it goes back to that comparison problem. The expectations in a homeschool may be drastically different than the expectations in a public school. They're sitting there, they're listening, they have to take tests, they're doing activities, they have to go from class to class, they have to put their bags up in the morning. That's those expectations. Our expectations may be like what you said. I want to just walk down, make breakfast, and see my daughter picking a book off the shelf and reading it on the couch while I make everyone breakfast.
Right. Yeah. That's my goal.
That's the goal. That's the expectations. Or I want to see my daughter pick up a hobby and just run with it. And every day just pick it up and do it. Right. I want her to be passionate about things. Like, I think our expectations sometimes are clouded by some of those other issues that we talked about a little bit earlier. Setting those right expectations, I think, are really understanding they can be different than what they are in the public school.
Absolutely. And as part of your expectation, you need to expect that you're going to have ups and downs. This is definitely not a smooth journey. Every day is not going to be easy. So prepare for that so that you're not sitting there thinking that a bad day equals a bad parent educator, because that's not, those two are not equated like that.
What?
You
have a bad day, you're done.
Well, you're giving so much of yourself to your kids as a parent, and then even more so as a parent educator.
Yeah.
And it's hard when things don't go the way that you want them to, or you're getting resistance from your kids or whatever it is, that you don't feel like it's me.
They're not judging you.
Right? I mean, it's really hard not to feel like personally, like, oh man,
I screwed this up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really doing a bad job. How do you not take that personally
Right.
when you've put all this effort in and love and care, and you've made this decision to bring your kids home? And perhaps you've made the decision to bring your kids home and they were kind of sort of on board with that, and you're proving to yourself, you're proving to your spouse who maybe wasn't as on board with your decision to homeschool, whatever it is. And you have days that aren't great and you're just like, man, I'm a failure. Yeah. And so the expectation needs to be that there's going to be good days and there's going to be crummy days.
I agree. And
it has to be, because there will be.
And that goes into the next idea, which is celebrating progress. When you do have good progress, you celebrate it. It's a journey, right? There's going to be so many.
Learning is a journey.
There's so many mileposts between now and when they go to college. At least in my mind, right? Not every kid has to go to college. Not every kid has to do that. But for me, it's like, okay, college. I have so many mileposts between now and then that I'm going to celebrate every single one of them, because you're right. It's once you start to get into the idea of like following the process. This is about a process, and I know I keep going. I always bring up the sporting analogy that it's a process. You work out, you practice, you train, you go into the game. Don't be shocked that you won, because the winning is the outcome of all that effort before, right? I love that metaphor. It's all a process, because it's such a long thing, and you can't sit there and like be worried about what's going to happen in the next week or month or whatnot. I'm worried about, okay, what's 2 years from now? What's 5 years from now? How do I get to that point? And we're climbing up the mountain, but
there's some valleys.
But there's some valleys. There's we're gonna have to like put a ladder across and go across a crevice, right? It's like climbing a mountain. I think it's a good way of saying.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's a journey, and so celebrating those milestones and those meaningful metrics, right? When you have meaningful metrics and then you get to celebrate those, it's just like, it really is really impactful.
It reinforces, It
reinforces why you've made this decision. And, acknowledging those achievements too is a really great boost for your kids, because then they're like, okay, yeah, mom or dad's really, really proud of me. I did this thing. We accomplished this together. Celebrating your accomplishments helps give you that fuel to keep going.
Well, and with the celebration, it gives you that positive mindset, and you can approach your homeschooling that, hey, look at all these successes behind us. We talk about this a lot of times with like anxiety or fears of anything. It's like, okay, I understand we're a little concerned now, but look at all the success we've had before. Yeah. And you say, okay, I know we're concerned about this, but you've done a lot of things up to this point. Let's look back at that success, and let's use that to help us get through this current, fear or uncertainty and whatnot. And I think that applies to homeschooling as well. And I do this with my daughter all the time. Hey, you're having trouble with this book? Hey, no problem. Let's take a break. Can I show you a story you read 2 weeks ago? Okay. This was twice as long as this one, And it was way more difficult. This one has a few words that we've just learned, and I'm here to help you with that. But I'm really proud of how hard you worked back here. I think we could do this together. And if you're not feeling like 100% today, let's do it together. And then maybe tomorrow you can read it on your own, right? Just understand that like you've done all this great work up to it. Use that as a leverage, I think, going forward. And that keeps everything positive, keeps it motivating. Showing how hard they've worked in the past can motivate them and say, well, that was hard back then. And I was scared back then, but I did it and I did it successfully. Maybe I can do it again. And then get them past that uncertainty. I love that. I love that mentality of a way of approaching those things.
And I think it's great too, because if you can be positive with your kids, we're always talking about like fake it till you make it, right?
Always.
And if you can, even if you're not really feeling it, try to be positive with your kids. You'll be surprised how that will rub off on you and will impact your own self-confidence.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things when my daughter is having an anxious moment and I start coaching her through that anxiety. Before our trip to Ireland, she was anxious about this. She'd not been overseas since she was a baby, so she didn't really remember. And she was really nervous about that. Well, I was also nervous about that. I also had some anxious feelings about that. But in coaching her through and talking her through her anxieties about it, I was treating myself at the same time because I was feeling more secure. And the same thing happens with this. If you can be positive and you can project confidence to your kids, you will feel more confident. It's just, you just all rubs off all that positive energy. So really think positively, even if, you're not always feeling it.
And, with that positive nature and that you're feeling better, that allows you to focus on these strengths that you might have, whatever they might be, whether you're, choosing curriculums or activities or,
maybe art is your strength, right?
Exactly.
Focus on that. When you're feeling those moments of doubt, go back into the things that you feel solid in.
Yeah.
When you're feeling like you're really doubting yourself, that's not the moment to take on something that you feel shaky about, right? That's the moment to really say, okay, let's get grounded. I'm great at this. Let's focus on this.
And a lot of times we have so many curriculums, right? We have 3 or 4 or 5 curriculums that we're doing at one time, right? Whether it's math or reading, writing, our regular social studies curriculum, whatever it might be. There may be a curriculum you guys that's your bread and butter, right? You can just go to your strength, see if you can have a good experience, and then maybe pivot and do the subject that might be a little bit challenging. So really just, focusing on those strengths, focusing on that. Moving beyond that is understanding this idea of continuous learning. I know a lot of times when we are uncertain about certain things and we have a lot of doubt, especially within ourselves, doing the work and learning and understanding, going to YouTube, watch the books, read the books, read a blog, go to Teachers Pay Teachers and see what type of activity books that there are out there.
Right.
Like there's really diving deep into the material can really help dispel a lot of that myth. I know we talked about that in the Educators Becoming a Better Educator podcast, but this even applies here as well. As if you have some fear, study, prepare.
That's right. Yeah. If you're afraid to teach chemistry, now's the time to hit YouTube or find the book or the resource that you need to fill in whatever educational gap you have so that you can approach this confidently.
Well, and even that continuous learning goes back to what we said kind of earlier is find a tribe, find people who are struggling who have struggled through the exact same thing, understand how they got through it and use that as leverage to move yourself forward through whatever doubts you might have.
And it's really important too with all of this is that we regularly reflect. I think this is one of the most important parts about overcoming the doubt that I have felt, and I know you've felt at times, which is really to take time to recognize, what went well, what didn't, try to be objective about it, and really keep in mind your goals and your purpose for homeschooling. We had a wonderful episode on homeschooling purpose, which Matt will link in the show notes, that really connect with the core because you have very strong reasons for why you've made this change. This isn't like, chips or fries. Right? This isn't like a quick decision to make. You made this decision to homeschool for strong reasons, and you need to keep that core purpose in mind when you're having tough days and you're doubting yourself.
And even beyond that, the self-care, like those kind of go together if you're doing some reflection, maybe even thinking about, okay, can I take time off? Maybe I need to go see a movie. Maybe I need to get a hobby.
Manage your stress.
Maybe I'm doing too much homeschool and I got to pare it down a little bit so I can have a little bit of time outside to do whatever. Or maybe you have a better experience reading out on the hammock in the sun. Maybe going to the park and walking with your kids and not being so locked into the house. Taking care of yourself, I think, is an important thing. I found that to be very critical for me as well.
Right.
Just getting out of the house, having adult time, going on dates with your spouse, whatever it takes to feel like an adult. Because I know a lot of times you're around kids all day long. You're at school and you're surrounded, at the co-op or whatever, you're surrounded by kids. You're doing play dates and you're surrounded by kids. And a lot of times you're serving those kids all day long, whether it's education, you're helping them, through meals or snacks or getting their bags together, whatever it might be. It feels like you're always serving. And sometimes it's good to take care of yourself and get out and get away and take a break, because I know it could be very daunting and challenging.
It can. It's very hard to balance yourself as a homeschool parent because you're kind of always on.
Yeah.
You're always here. And I know that you feel that way. When I come home, once a week at least, you get, your night out where you're just like off for the night. And we really do need that. You need that time to recharge so you can come back confidently. The more that you run yourself down by not caring for yourself, the more doubt will creep in and you'll think that you're not cut out for this. Mm-hmm. This wasn't the right decision for your kids, for yourself, and with all of this, remember, if none of this is working, maybe it's time to just take a break. Everybody gets a little bit of homeschool burnout. There's different times of year, and we have a couple of good episodes about burnout, about getting your groove back. If you're just not feeling it, it might be time for a little break. All homeschoolers go through this kind of cyclic cycle of being excited for the new year, and then you get rolling enough into it, and then you kind of starts to wane. You get burnout just past Christmas, and it's like this
you have a couple
ebbs and flows.
Yeah, you have a couple bad weeks, and you feel like everything's falling apart.
Right, everybody in the house is sick, and then you got to care for
because we know what's coming.
Oh yeah.
Well, it was a joke yesterday. I sent a picture to Ariel while I was shopping at the store, and it was children's Tylenol and cold and flu stuff, and I'm like,
we were stocking up.
Ignore me. I'm just doing some back to school shopping.
Right. Yeah. Last spring,
we know what's coming.
Earlier this year in spring, we were sick every week. There was one member of our family that was sick and constantly, and it started to wear on all of us. Yeah. And we both started to have shorter tempers, and we were getting frustrated, and it was like doubt was really creeping in, and it can happen. So it's not just a new homeschooler problem. It happens to all of us. But if burnout is part of the problem, definitely address that before you start doubting yourself and doubting your abilities. So just to sum things up, trying to get rid of this parental doubt, it can be a gradual process, especially if you're new and you're uncertain about homeschooling. Don't forget that, it takes time, right, to feel more confident in this role. But just embrace this. It's part of your growth as an educator and as a parent. So, working on this is something that we all had to do when we started, because I don't know of very many homeschoolers that started feeling 100% confident in themselves that they had it all handled and it was all going to be perfect and no problems. I think we all doubt ourselves, definitely in the beginning and every once in a while too.
Yeah, it definitely takes some time to get that seasoning where you have like those. I see them at the parent partnership. You see the parents that have the older kids, and it's like they've been through a lot.
They have.
You can see it in the eyes. They're like, I've seen it all.
Nothing phases them. And you've seen the ones with the younger kids, and they sometimes
deer in the headlights, man.
They really look just shell shocked about the whole thing. So I think it's a process. Mm-hmm. And just remember, every moment that you have doubt or experience that, it just presents a chance. We can learn, we can adapt, strengthen our abilities. Ultimately, that benefits both you and your kids and this educational journey that you're on. So don't let doubt tear you down or make you think that homeschooling is not the right option for your kids. Take some time, take a breath, try some of these things, and see if you can't get your ship righted. And we hope this was really helpful to everybody and might help you if you're feeling a little down about your homeschooling journey.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time.
Happy homeschooling!